But this government...
Does government look?
Look how Nigeria looks like.
My son, as the president of this country, you're now vice president.
Have faith, my people, for I believe that one day our country will be saved by someone great.
In the heart of a dusty, beautiful village in Nigeria, there lived a man who everyone knew simply as Okaya. Okaya was not a man of great wealth, and he did not live in a big house made of bricks and glass, but he possessed a gift that was far more precious than gold. He was a singer, and his voice was like a soothing river that flowed through the dry lands of his community, bringing hope to those who are tired and comfort to those who are sad. Every single day, Okaya would walk through the market stores, carrying his simple wooden instrument, and he would sing songs that spoke of the lives of the ordinary people. He sang about the farmers who worked under the hot sun all day long just to put food on their families' tables, and he sang about the mothers who worked for miles to fetch clean water from the streams. The people loved him with all their hearts because in his songs, they finally heard their own stories being told, and they felt that someone truly understood their pain and their dreams for a better tomorrow. However, while the people in the village were struggling to survive, the life in the capital city of Nigeria was very different. There lived a man named President Ajoga, who held the highest power in the land, but his heart was not filled with love for his citizens. Instead, President Ajoga was a very selfish man who cared only for himself and his own family. He looked at the government as if it were a private business that belonged only to his brothers, his cousins, and his closest friends. Whenever there was a big job to be done or a high position in the security forces to be filled, he did not look for the smartest or the kindest people. He only chose his own relatives. Because of this, the roads in the villages remained broken and full of deep holes. The schools had no books for the children to read, and the hospitals had no medicine for the sick. The citizens felt heavy in their spirits because they worked hard, yet they saw their country being pulled apart by those who were supposed to be protecting it. The air in the village was usually quiet, but one sunny morning, a very exciting rumor began to spread like wildfire from hut to hut. The villagers whispered to each other with wide eyes and happy smiles that a very important visitor was coming all the way from a far-off place. They learned that a man named Mr. Cliff was coming to their village, and he was not just an ordinary traveler. Mr. Cliff was part of a very special project that was started and paid for by the President of the United States and all the kind people of America. Their mission was very noble because they wanted to reach out to the people of Africa to help them build better schools where children could learn, big hospitals where people could get the medicine they needed, and the clean water projects so that the mothers would not have to walk so far to fill their buckets. The villagers were so happy that they started cleaning their paths and preparing their best food, wanting to show the visitor that even though they were poor, they were people filled with love, pride, and kindness. As the sun began to climb higher in the sky, the village elders held a quick meeting under the big mango tree to decide how they could give Mr. Cliff the best welcome he had ever seen. One elder, who had seen many years and understood the spirit of the people, stood up and said that there was only one way to truly show Mr. Cliff who they were. They needed a voice that sang for their souls, and so they sent a young boy running as fast as his legs could carry him to find Okaya. When Okaya arrived at the gathering, he saw the excitement on the faces of his neighbors, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility in his chest. He knew that this visitor represented a bridge between their difficult life and a possible future, so he tuned his instrument with great care. He decided that he would not just sing any song, he would sing a melody that carried the heartbeat of Nigeria, a song that told of their struggles, their resilience, and their undying hope for a day when their children would grow up in a land of peace and plenty. The villagers stood in a circle, waiting with bated breath, knowing that when Okaya opened his mouth to sing, the world would finally listen to the truth of their lives. The anticipation in the village grew with every passing moment as the time for Mr. Cliff's arrival drew closer. People had gathered in the central clearing, decorating the area with colorful cloths and sweeping the dusty ground until it was as clean as a new floor. Mr. Cliff arrived in a sturdy vehicle that bumped along the rough, and paved the roads, and when he stepped out, he looked around with eyes full of genuine curiosity and kindness. He was a man with a tall stature and a warm, welcoming smile that seemed to put everyone at ease immediately. He was not dressed in fancy clothes, but rather in simple, practical garments, showing that he had come here to work and to listen. The village elders stepped forward to greet him, their faces beaming with pride, and they explained to him that they had been eagerly waiting for his arrival because they truly wanted their village to thrive and their children to have the bright futures they deserved. Mr. Cliff listened carefully, nodding his head with respect, and he told them that he was very happy to be there to help coordinate the projects for better health, clean water, and schools. While the elders were talking to Mr. Cliff, the villagers turned their eyes toward Okaya, signaling that the time for the special surprise had come. Okaya stepped into the center of the crowd, feeling the eyes of his community upon him, and he took a deep breath to steady his beating heart. He held his wooden instrument tightly, feeling the familiar texture of the strings, and began to play a soft, rhythmic melody that seemed to mimic the sounds of the Nigerian wind blowing through the savanna trees. Then he began to sing. His voice was strong, clear, and filled with such deep emotion that it made everyone stop what they were doing to listen. He sang about the beauty of their land, the golden sunsets that dipped behind the hills, and the hard work of the people who woke up before the sun to cultivate the soil. But as the song went on, his voice deepened, carrying the weight of the struggles the people faced because of the choices made by those in power. He did not sing with anger or hatred, but with a plea for justice and a vision of what their country could be if every citizen were treated with the dignity they deserved. Mr. Cliff watched in total silence, completely mesmerized by the man standing before him. He saw how the people around Okaya were moved to tears, and he saw the honesty and the intense love that this singer felt for his nation and his fellow citizens. The song was a window into the soul of the Nigerian people, showing Mr. Cliff that beneath the poverty and the neglect of the government, there lived a proud and vibrant spirit that just needed a chance to shine. As Okaya reached the final notes of his song, the silence in the clearing was heavy and beautiful, and then, slowly, the villagers began to applaud, their cheers rising up to the sky. Mr. Cliff walked forward, his expression full of admiration, and he reached out to shake Okaya's hand with both of his, looking him straight in the eye. He told Okaya that he had traveled to many places and heard many songs, but he had never heard a voice that carried so much truth and so much love for a country. The bond between the two men was formed in that very moment, a connection built on mutual respect and a shared desire to see people living better lives. Mr. Cliff spent the rest of the day asking Okaya questions, wanting to understand more about his background, his dreams, and the reasons why he sang the way he did. They sat under the shade of the mango tree, talking for hours, while the other villagers prepared a great feast in honor of the guest. Okaya spoke with great wisdom, explaining that he did not sing to make himself famous, but to remind the world that his people were resilient and capable of greatness if only given the right tools. Mr. Cliff, who had spent his life working in international development, saw in Okaya a leader of the people, a man who did not seek power for his own gain, but someone who understood the heartbeat of his community. He realized that if he could help someone with this level of passion and intelligence to gain an even deeper understanding of the world, it could change everything for the future of the nation. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Mr. Cliff made a decision that would change the course of Okaya's life forever. He told Okaya that his voice was a tool for change and that it deserved to be heard on the largest stage possible. He explained that there were opportunities in the United States, at the most prestigious places of learning like Harvard University, where people from all over the world gathered to learn how to solve the biggest problems facing their home countries. He offered to help Okaya travel there, to be educated in the ways of leadership, economics, and service, so that he could come back not just as a singer, but as a person equipped with the knowledge to help his nation heal and grow. Okaya was silent for a long time, looking at his village, the place he had always known, and then he looked back at Mr. Cliff, feeling a sudden, overwhelming surge of hope. He knew that this was the answer to all his songs, the beginning of the road he had always dreamed of walking, and he nodded his head, promising to work hard and learn everything he could to save his beloved Nigeria. The days that followed the departure of Mr. Cliff from the village were filled with a mixture of nervous excitement and deep reflection for Okaya. He had spent his entire life in the familiar embrace of his home, where every path was etched into his memory and every face was a friend. Leaving it behind to fly across the vast ocean to the United States felt like stepping into a dream that was both wonderful and frightening. Mr. Cliff stayed true to his word, working tirelessly behind the scenes with his contacts and the government agencies to secure everything needed for Okaya's journey. There were many papers to sign, health checks to pass, and travel arrangements to be made, but through it all, Okaya never lost his focus. He knew that this was not just a trip for himself, it was a mission that carried the hopes and prayers of all the people in his village who had cheered for him. Before he finally left, he gathered his family and friends under the same mango tree where he had first sung for Mr. Cliff, and he promised them that he would return with the knowledge and the strength to help them build the Nigeria they all deserve. When the day of the journey arrived, the entire village walked with Okaya to the dusty road where he would catch his ride to the city. There were tears in the eyes of his mother, but they were tears of pride, for she knew her son was destined for something truly meaningful. Mr. Cliff met him in the city, greeting him with the same warm smile and steady confidence that had initially inspired such trust. As they boarded the airplane, Okaya looked out the window, watching the green landscape of his home shrink until it was just a tiny patch of color beneath the clouds. The journey was long and full of new sights, but as the plane touched down in the United States, Okaya felt a surge of energy. Everything looked different. The buildings were taller than anything he had ever imagined. The streets were filled with busy people moving with purpose, and the air felt charged with the promise of new possibilities. Mr. Cliff guided him through the city, showing him how to navigate this new environment, and he ensured that Okaya felt supported at every single turn. Soon, the time came for Okaya to start his studies at Harvard University. Walking onto that historic campus for the first time felt like stepping into a center of gravity where the brightest minds from every corner of the globe came to exchange ideas. The buildings were grand, covered in climbing vines, and the libraries were filled with thousands of books that contained the secrets of how nations functioned, how economies grew, and how laws were crafted to protect the weak. At first, it was overwhelming for a man who had spent his life singing under the village sun, but Okaya possessed a natural brilliance and a drive that surpassed all obstacles. He sat in lecture halls alongside students who had come from powerful backgrounds, but he did not feel small. He felt the weight of his village behind him, and that made him study harder than anyone else. He spent his nights in the library, reading until his eyes were heavy, and his mind was brimming with new concepts about government, infrastructure, and international cooperation. Okaya learned about the complex systems that made modern countries strong, including how to build fair tax systems, how to manage natural resources for the benefit of all citizens, and how to create jobs that would keep young people in their own land. He discovered that the most powerful thing a leader could have was not a big army or a fancy title, but the trust of the people and a clear, honest plan for the future. He spent hours talking with his professors, sharing with them the reality of life in Nigeria and asking them how the solutions he was learning could be adapted to fit the unique needs of his countrymen. They were deeply impressed by his dedication, often telling him that his practical understanding of human suffering, combined with the academic training he was receiving, made him a rare and special student. He became a bridge between his world and theirs, often singing his songs in his dormitory or at campus gatherings, sharing the soul of Nigeria with those who had never been there. The years at Harvard flew by, but for Okaya, they were filled with profound transformation. He grew not just in knowledge, but in confidence and leadership. He learned how to stand in front of large crowds and speak with clarity and authority, not just singing about the problems, but articulating clear, actionable paths to fix them. He kept a small worn photograph of his village in his pocket, and whenever he felt the loneliness of being so far away, he would look at it to remember exactly why he was there. He knew that his time in the United States was a precious gift provided by the kindness of American people, and he treated every day as a sacred opportunity. He was preparing to become the servant leader his country had been waiting for, a man who would return with a head full of solutions and a heart still firmly rooted in the love of his people. He was no longer just the artist who sang about suffering. He was becoming the visionary who would eventually lead his people out of the darkness and into a brand new day of prosperity and peace. As Okaya neared the end of his time at Harvard, the person he had become was vastly different from the man who had first played his wooden instrument under the mango tree. The education he received had sharpened his mind like a blade, turning his raw passion into a structured plan for national renewal. He spent his final months in the United States, not just attending classes, but meeting with experts in urban planning, agricultural development, and healthcare administration. He traveled across different American states, observing how clean water was delivered to every household, how schools were funded to ensure every child had a chair and a book, and how infrastructure projects were managed with honesty and efficiency. He took thousands of notes, filling notebook after notebook with diagrams, economic strategies, and social policies. He realized that the foundation of a strong country was not just about building roads, but about building a culture of accountability where leaders answered to the people and where the law applied equally to everyone, whether they were a powerful official or a humble farmer. During these months, Okaya formed deep, lasting partnerships with American organizations that were committed to global development. He presented his vision for a transformed Nigeria to groups of investors and humanitarians, speaking with such sincerity and clarity that many of them pledged to support his efforts the moment he returned home. He was no longer asking for charity, he was offering a partnership for progress. He carefully mapped out a plan that prioritized the most urgent needs of his country. First, providing clean water and electricity to the neglected villages. Second, rebuilding the crumbling school systems. And third, creating job opportunities for the youth who had felt forgotten for so long. He knew that if he could prove to his people that change was possible through hard work and transparent leadership, he could unite the entire nation under a common purpose. He saw his return not as the end of his journey, but as the beginning of the most important song he would ever compose, the song of a new, prosperous Nigeria. His mentors at the university often praised his growth, noting that he had retained the soul of an artist even while mastering the complexities of a statesperson. They admired his humility and his unwavering focus on his original goal. One of his favorite professors once told him that many people study to gain power, but Okaya studied to gain the ability to serve, and that was the mark of a true leader. With these words of encouragement echoing in his mind, Okaya began to pack his bags, not with clothes, but with the blueprints and strategies he had painstakingly developed. He was ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing that the journey back would be filled with obstacles, particularly from those who benefited from the current system of corruption. He understood that President Ajoga would not willingly give up his selfish hold on the country, but he also knew that he would not be standing alone. He had the backing of a global community and, more importantly, the unwavering trust of his own people. In his final weeks in the United States, Okaya took a moment to visit the national capital, where he walked through the halls of government and saw the monuments that honored those who had sacrificed for the freedom and unity of their nation. He stood in silence before the great marble statues, thinking about how history is shaped by individuals who refuse to give up even when the path is steep and difficult. He prayed for the wisdom to be that kind of leader for Nigeria. He felt a profound sense of gratitude toward the American people who had opened their schools and their hearts to him, and he made a solemn vow that he would honor that kindness by ensuring that the collaboration between his country and theirs would be based on mutual respect and genuine love. He felt that he was returning not just as a graduate, but as a messenger of a new era of friendship between the two nations. When the day finally came for his departure, Okaya walked to the airport with his head held high and his heart full of peace. He felt a deep, steady rhythm in his chest, almost like the beat of his old instrument, but now it was the rhythm of a nation waiting to be awakened. He looked at the ticket in his hand and then out at the horizon, imagining the faces of his mother, his friends, and the villagers who were waiting for him. He knew that when he landed back on Nigerian soil, he would have to start working immediately to earn the trust of the P.O. not just as their favorite singer, but as their future leader. He was ready to take on the responsibility, ready to challenge the status quo,